Welcome to the Warner Healing Guidance Sunday live stream broadcasting from beautiful St. Petersburg, Florida. If you have a question or want to participate, use the live chat. Here's the guy with the questions to all of your answers, Douglas Warner.
Good evening, everyone. And I'd like to say thanks, Rob, and happy Mother's Day. I've got to acknowledge that. I think I got my brownie points this morning. I cooked brunch for my wife, my mother-in-law, and my daughter, all mothers. So I hope you all had a good Mother's Day, if that's appropriate. So tonight's chat, before we get started, I do want to remind you, if you would, is to subscribe, like, do all those things that YouTube likes us to do, likes you to do, and we appreciate it too. If you subscribe to the channel, you get to, comes up in your feed all the time, and you get to be on top of the game. So tonight's topic is opinions, and I think it's a very pertinent one. I came up with this topic this last week, watching a little more media than I normally do, seeing things on YouTube, listening to the radio, papers, and what have you, and it kind of dawned on me that we tend to make decisions every day based on the opinions of other people. Everywhere you turn, we're making decisions, or other people are trying to get us to make decisions, or to sell their opinion to us. Whether it's about religion, politics, our definition of success, what to buy, what to wear, who to like, who to dislike, how to be a real man or be a real woman. All of these things, people have an opinion and they're trying to convince us. And we make our daily decisions very often based on their agendas. And that's something to be aware of. What is their agenda? What is the agenda of those people who are trying to win you over to their opinion? Kind of seems that we're outsourcing. Outsourcing is a big topic these days. Seems like we're outsourcing what we think and what we value to strangers. I also found, and this has become something really, really evident in my life, that we're pushed to have strong opinions. I was just a few weeks ago was asked by someone what my opinion was on something in the news, and I really didn't have an opinion. In fact, that particular thing I wasn't even informed about. And I said, well, I don't really have an opinion. And, oh my gosh, this guy got so irate with me. How you don't have an opinion? How could you not have an opinion on this? And I was like, well, I didn't. I wasn't emotionally invested. I didn't have enough background information. And it got to me to understand, I got to think that having a strong opinion is very often confused with caring. If you don't have an opinion on something, it's equated to not caring, which is really a very false notion. And we want to maybe look at that a little bit later. I do want to remind you that as we're talking here, things might start to come to mind that you want to ask, questions you want to ask. You might even have tangential topics that you might want to have me address. So feel free to chat in. We will get to your questions. We'll get to those topics if we can this evening. And if we can't do it tonight, we will pick those up at a future chat. Seems like back to our opinions, it seems like every time we turn on the media, we pick up the newspaper, we're getting opinions from everyone else. And if we listen to all the talking heads, our heads are going to be spinning 360 all the time. We're bouncing around, we're reactive. Our emotions, our actions, even the paradigms we live by can seem to shift with whatever the latest opinion is of the day. Sometimes you just want it all just shut down and everybody just to back off, shut it all off. I do. We even noticed that our governments even often are consistently, not just the United States government, this is nothing against our government. Every government that I'm familiar with, and even throughout history, have been trying to shape the opinions of their population, and ours is no different. Today, this group is the enemy. These are the people we shouldn't like anymore, or those people we have to be careful of, and this type of thing. I noticed, when I was starting to travel back in the 1970s in college, There was a lot, of course, political turmoil going on, as there always is. And I was told, well, the French people or these people or this group of people, they don't like Americans. And very strong political opinions here at home, or the people of that country don't like us. So I started traveling, and it was really interesting because once I got into those countries and I got to talking with people, I found not only were they pretty much like we are, but they liked Americans. They liked us. It was not the story we had been told, uh, and we realized that what people tended to not like were our politics or our politicians. It wasn't the people. So what that leads me to realize, and want you to start to realize, is that my direct experience in talking with these people started to inform me. It started to give me my direct observation, my assessment started to be in conflict with those opinions. And I started to say, well, there's got to be a difference here. There's got to be a difference. And one of the things I want to say here is that I'm starting to rail on opinions, but there's a time and place for us to default to the opinions of others. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. I'm not saying always accepting someone else's opinion is wrong or even damaging, but we tend to do it too much. We want to look for a little balance here. We want to be able to hear the opinions of others, especially those that are experts, and be able to evaluate them with some discernment. Um, and the question becomes then, who do I listen to? When do I listen to them? And the first place we have to examine, the first place we have to go is looking at ourselves. Right? How do I know who to listen to? How do I make that determination of uh, whose opinion is worthwhile? How do we make a decision there? Uh, how do we have to ask ourselves, have to objectively be able to ask ourselves, um, sit back and go, I have to be able to look at the situation, look at what I'm asking, and what do I need, and listen to the input that's coming my way, not just emotionally react. Opinions can be needed at times, but they also become veils. This is one of the things I want to point out this evening, is opinions of other people are important. Our having opinions is not wrong, but all too often they become veils. They become colored glasses, rose-colored glasses, if you will, that we see the world through. They distort our vision. They become filters that we drag our life experiences through. So the idea is if we can start to loosen our grip a little bit on our opinions, having just a little less of it, we start to adopt what we call a beginner's mind. We can start to get some clarity on our lives, some objectivity. Does that make sense, Rob?
Kind of. I mean, I know the term rose-colored glasses, and you use the term veil to start off with.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I don't know if I totally. I mean, I kind of get the concept of what you're saying, but not.
My opinions very often, well, let me rephrase that, or let's go back to that. This idea of our opinions, when we're not objectively assessing where those opinions are coming from and how they're serving us, when we're um, just accepting opinions carte blanche, they become, if you think of veils, like a veil you can see through, something very gauzy, maybe sheets of gauze that you can see through, but it distorts the image behind it. You get some image, you get some light through. Or looking through a glass darkly, which is a quotation actually from Christian scripture. I'm not getting the full view. This idea that opinions are like a filter. We push this opinion through the filter, and it can distort things. The filters, our opinions become filters that distort our experiences. So it shapes how we view things. Our opinions start to shape how we view things. Let me tell a story. And this is kind of a classic story, but there's this farmer, and the farmer had hired the neighbor kid, he was 18 years old, to come over and help him do some work. And the kid had been using the axe. So The kid leaves, and a couple days later, the farmer realizes he can't find his axe. The axe is gone. He seems like can't find it. And boy, he said, I know that kid, that 18-year-old, he took my axe. I just know it. He's a thief. Because the farmer looked everywhere for it and he couldn't find it. So he has started to formulate this opinion, that kid is a thief. And every time, but he didn't have any evidence, so really have evidence on this. So he didn't outright accuse the kid, but every time he saw the kid cross the field, he'd look at him and go, oh, look at, he walks like a thief. He's the set of his shoulders, he's just like a thief. And look at that shifty look on his face. So this went on for a while. Every time he saw the kid, his opinion just got more and more entrenched, and his anger got more inflamed. Well, as it went, one day his wife was in the barn looking for something and found his axe that he had lost and had thought had been stolen. Gave him the axe, and interesting enough, the next time the farmer saw the 18-year-old cross the field, he looked like just any other 18-year-old. So the idea is that that opinion that he had obviously had shaped how he viewed this kid. And so we do this a lot. We do it ourselves. I've done it. I'm sure everyone out there has done it at some point. And there's a lot of people out there in marketing, in the political world, and every facet of our lives that are trying to do the same thing. They're trying to shape our opinions so that we react in a certain way. We buy a certain product, or we adhere to a certain belief system, or we choose to not like a group of people or like a group of people, this type of thing. So one of the questions we need to ask ourselves is this opinion I have, where did it come from? Let's just start with that. Where did it come from? Did I get that from my own personal experience, my own observation? Or is this something that was handed to me and I just accepted it? So here's an example. Rob, chime in on this because you might have an interesting perspective here. So I'm going to give you just a mock scenarios, if you will, of how an observation from my direct experience can evolve into an opinion, and how we have to how this thing kind of grows. So hypothetically, let's suppose I'm married, so I'm not dating anyone else. So let me make that clear. But let's say I've been dating a brunette, and over time that relationship kind of faltered, fell away, didn't work out. And I made some assessments, some observations from my direct experience that this did not work out because this particular person who was a brunette, I just made that connection for whatever reason, for these reasons. This person was this person was that, and I categorize it. That's my observation, that's my assessment of that person in this relationship, and that person happened to be a brunette. Okay, that's my assessment, that's my observation. It's not so much an opinion. I had a direct experience. This is what I observed. Now,
so is this like that cliche about blonde, like dumb blondes or something like that? I mean, I know it's not.
Well, it leads into this generalization, right? So yeah, so follow on with me and see if this answers your question. So then that's an observation, that's an assessment based on my experience. Now, if I were to say then every blonde, not blonde to this, you got me thinking about blondes, Rob. Every brunette is this way because my experience with one turned out to be a particular thing. But I'm going to go a step further and say now, generalize that all brunettes are a certain way. Of course, that's a generalization. And I'm taking myself, that assessment, that observation now came out of my experiences now back here, and I'm extrapolating to all brunettes. I'm out of my field of experience. Now I'm formulating an opinion, a generalization that probably is pretty far removed from my reality, my truth. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. So the initial truth we're looking for is found through your own direct experience. Anything that we start to extrapolate beyond that, we start moving further and further into the realm of opinion. I formulated opinion, a generalization about all brunettes. Now you can see where this leads. We can start to really limit ourselves when we start doing this. But this is just an awareness check.
That is an opinion that can be misleading us, and that's based on my experience. What about those opinions that have nothing to do with anything I've ever done that we accept? We have no idea where those are coming from. We don't have no idea what the agenda is of the people who handed us those opinions. So the further that we stray from our own experience, the more critical we need to be of our observations and hold on really loosely to opinions we start to formulate. Is this, how do I know this? Because I'm starting to make, I'm really upset about that relationship, and I'm really, all brunettes are this way. And I might even go, and I might even say all women are this way, or all men are this way. And we've heard that quite a bit. So a litmus test for ourselves is, as we start to formulate these opinions, how far removed from my personal experience is this, my direct observation? And then we start to learn to hold on a little bit loosely to our opinions. So let's kind of bring this into your life. Bring it right into your home right now. Let's start to look at some of the personal opinions you have, the ones that are really close to home for you. And ask yourself, how did I come up with this opinion? How did I come up with this? I've believed this my whole life, or a good part of my life. Where did it come from? Did it come from my direct experience? My observation? Did I start to form a generalization based on something I had an experience in? Or did I just take a gift from someone and take on their opinion? And there could be a lot of these big things. Start to see if any of these ring true to you. Maybe about what's your opinion, or what do you consider success in life? Where did you get your opinion on that? Where did you get your perception of that? What does it mean to be successful? Maybe what career you should choose, what career you should be in. How do we come up with that? What was acceptable? What was not acceptable? Where did that opinion that you have, or those opinions you have, where did they come from? Maybe what kind of education you should pursue. I knew when I was growing up is there was no question. You're going to college. You're going to college. And fortunately, I wanted to go to college. But I know a lot of folks who might be directed to do things that that wasn't really fitting them. What kind of partner you should have? Who makes an appropriate partner for you? Where did that paradigm evolve from? Is that something you came up with? Is this something someone kind of levied on you over time? What religion or spiritual path is appropriate? That's a big one too. Where did that come from? So maybe taking one of those, and I'm going to say, let's look at the one about success. How did you come up with your idea of what it means to be a successful person? And just give that a little bit of thought. And maybe even throughout this chat tonight, and after we go off the air, start to examine some of that and some of the other categories. Where did I come up with this? Start to examine our opinions. This is a very powerful practice.
As you said that, I was thinking about body type and how we have these opinions about what is beautiful, or what is the right body type, or what it means to look like a certain type of man or a certain type of woman.
Absolutely. Boy, talk about, and let's look at that one for a second. Let's look at this. Rob brought up a really good one about body type, and we have some real definite cultural paradigms that have been developed. But what a guy's supposed to look like? What's an attractive guy supposed to look like? What's an attractive woman supposed to look like? And where did those come from? Who's generating those? Is that really what people are supposed to look like? Or is that what does it take to get there, and why? What's that based on? Is that based on this is healthy? Or maybe it's based on someone trying to sell you something, trying to sell you something. Why do clothes fashions change every year? Okay, there's nothing wrong with those flare bell-bottom jeans we wore. They all seem to come back anyway, right? Fashion changes every year, and everyone has to have the newest thing, or most everyone. Rob and I are not slaves to fashion, but in any event, where do those come from, and why are we adhering to them? What kind of social pressure do we get if we don't buy it, if we don't drink the Kool-Aid? What happens? Uh, what is the agenda of those who have given us those opinions? Now, I can tell you, we can start to look at them. I can look at my life. I can't speak for you, but I know as I was growing up, as most kids are, you adopt to a great degree the opinions and the values of your parents and your culture, your education system. If you have a religion or a faith, and that religion and faith informs you. But as we get older, we start to maybe have some drives that take us in other directions. And this so often can bring us into conflict. I know it has in my life conflict with our parents. Um, there's so many great examples in some of the movies that have been out there. The Dead Poets Society, if you're ever familiar with that, where that young man his father wanted him to be a doctor, and he wanted to be an actor, and he actually committed suicide in the movie because he wasn't following his dream. You see how this um, other folks, and why did that father want him to be a doctor? Well, one could say he wanted it to happen for his own good, but also I found, and that a lot of times, even the most giving and loving parents, even the most well meaning educators, or maybe even the most well meaning folks involved in religions or spiritual traditions, they have their own personal agenda as well. Parents want to see their children be successful, sometimes not just so the child is happy and healthy and has a wonderful life, but it reflects on them. They're using their child's success, whatever that their opinion or their definition of success is, and they're using it for their own social status. My son is a this. My son is a doctor, a lawyer, whatever it is. My son is on the soccer team or the baseball team, and he's first string or what have you.
Seems like our girlfriends and wives, and I've never had a husband, but I'm sure it goes the other way, to these other parts of our lives.
Sure. All these other, we have to, why is, when you're confronting an opinion from someone else that and they become adamant that you live up to that model that their opinion is generated, you have to ask yourself, especially as fully functioning adult, you have to ask yourself, why is it so important to them that I accept their opinion, their model, their paradigm? Very often, it has to do with they need validation. Sometimes they're trying to sell us something. We've talked about that. That becomes kind of clear, okay? But sometimes others need validation. The more people they get to buy into their opinion, the more secure they feel in their position. I've seen that many times. If I can get enough people to believe or hold my opinion, then I guess it must be right because they're all buying it from me. Am I using that? Are these folks using, trying to sell their opinion to me for their own aggrandizement, not just their gain? But and I know the audience I have out here, we've got a lot of different age groups. I'm a father and a grandfather. I have to check myself at the door. Raising my kids, I had to say, wait a minute, I'd like to see my son or my daughter, do this, this, and this. And I have to say, why? Why am I doing that? Is that for them or is that for me? And there were times I had to be honest with myself. It would have been the easier path for me, or it was based on my opinion of what success was, not their opinion. And I had to do a lot of self-reflection there, and I still do. I'm helping raise a granddaughter, so I'm going through this again, hopefully a little wiser. Think about soccer and sports and baseball and look at these parents wanting their children to succeed and pushing them to uh, to do things that are actually deforming or harmful to the children. And why? We see parents are the ones who break out into fights. Hardly ever hear any about making the news, kids breaking out into a fight after a baseball game. But you hear about parents breaking out into fights because they're so emotionally and psychologically invested in the success of their son or their daughter. And how does that affect in those kids? So I found in my life that there's a time and place that we need to default to the opinions of others. We're going to talk about that in 1 second here. But we also need to be able to examine clearly, objectively, with the beginner's mind a little bit, the opinions we have right now. And where did they come from? How did we formulate these? Uh, but I have to also have discernment when I go to get the opinion of someone else. I need an expert opinion. I go to the doctor. Doctor says I need surgery. Now, all of us have been enculturated and educated. Why don't you get a second opinion? Many doctors will tell you to go get a second opinion or a third opinion. Why? Even in the context of folks who have relatively equal expertise and relatively equal education in an area, we still want to get a variety of opinions because each one of those doctors is a human being with a conscious or unconscious agenda. They're trying to put their vision of what would be best for you. So even then, we're being asked very clearly, build some objectivity in that. Get 2 or 3 other folks in that field and get their opinion. Same thing with a car mechanic. There's a time and or any of these other things, any of these kinds of decisions when we're out of our field of our own expertise. But we do it consciously. This is the key through everything I'm talking about, is how to make a conscious arrangement with the opinions that you do have and how to navigate the opinions of others. Do it with your eyes wide open. Do it with a level of discernment and relative objectivity. Where did that come from? Is this based on my experience? If I need to default to the experience and the expertise of someone else, how can I listen? Can I assess what they have to say a little more objectively, a little more discernment? Yes, sir.
I was thinking as you said that how we take these opinions of others, and it made me think of used car salesmen and how they have this terrible opinion or this terrible reputation of being, it's a saying in our culture. We would say the used car salesman. But the used car salesman is trying to help us achieve our goals and trying to make us happy. And he's a little bit pushy or a little bit assertive, but that doesn't make. I mean, where does his opinion weigh? I mean, I know he's trying to sell me something, but I want to buy something, and so it's not like just because they're selling me something, it's bad.
No, absolutely not. We're in a world where, and by the way, we're in the business in somewhere in our lives of trying to sell someone something. We're trying to sell them or something, whatever business we're in. We're trying to sell our expertise. We're trying to convince people we're the right person for the job, all these things. This is where you go to the used car salesman. I'll use that example. And used car salesman, as you said, they are trying to help us meet our needs, but we need to be aware that they have an agenda just like anyone else selling us something. Used car salesmen have gotten to be a cliche. It's gotten to be a caricature because there's this perception they're selling us an inferior product and trying to make it look better than it really is. So in that sense, that doesn't mean used car salesmen are bad or they're all in anything less than reputable. What it means is it's become a caricature of, or a cartoon, if you will, of the person who is trying to sell us something that, yes, we need transportation, but this is not what we're looking for. And they're trying to convince us that this is what we need, and it's really not. So there's this level, this salesmanship and this type of thing that we have to, this goes back to discernment. I have to go in very clear that, okay, this salesman is trying to sell me something. And I have to weave through the words and the mind play of salesmanship and be a discerning buyer. I think as we've grown up and we've made our mistakes, we realize we have to be discerning shoppers. Even if we're shopping for a doctor or a car mechanic, we have to, why would I be getting that diagnosis? Why is he saying this about the car? But we also have to take that level of discernment. We've gotten fairly good with that when it comes to shopping, I think, at this point. Most of us have gotten fairly savvy with that. But there's other things that are being sold to us that don't quite look like a sale, but they're clearly a sale. And this is sometimes comes to us via politics, or it comes to us via organized religion. Sometimes it comes to us just through our relationships with friends and family and colleagues who we don't think they're selling us something, but they're trying to sell us their opinion on a particular area. We have to be able to step back, hear what's being said, and say, how does this marry up with, do I have any personal experience in this? And how does this relate to what I know from my own experience? If it doesn't, then we have to hold on loosely to those other people's opinions until we start to develop our own experience.
Yeah, so as you were talking about that, it reminded me of some of these family members I have who are always trying to sell me opinions all the time, or certain friends that are always trying to push a certain political agenda or a political idea. And because they're always pushing those opinions, the I kind of discount their opinions overall in general, and they kind of lose their credibility on the stuff when it comes to being friends or when it comes to being family, and they burn that I can't listen to them anymore.
They saturate it's like your sense of smell gets saturated when it smells the same smell over and over again. I can't smell anything now. Um, they absolutely, and this is part of what I'm getting at. That comes from one source. You're talking about just certain family members, but think about how we get bombarded consistently and constantly from so many directions by opinions. We start to discount anything we hear. Everybody's trying to sell us something. We become jaded, and we don't, when something really important is coming our way, an opinion that may be of great value, we may discount it out of hand because we've got, to use maybe some of the terminology of the day, fake news, fake opinions. They're just, the talking heads are everywhere. What do we believe? What do we know? I have found that one of the most liberating exercises, one of the most liberating things that I have done for myself, and something I'm going to share with you, is to let go of opinions, especially those opinions. We're not going to let go of everything. We're not letting go of every opinion we have, but to start to strip away methodically those opinions that are no longer serving us, the ones that we've observed, we've stepped back objectively and observed and said, I don't even know where that came from. In fact, if I really think about that, I've been living this opinion for a long time. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know where it came from. I'm not sure why I even believe it. And I'm really finding it's starting to damage my life. It's limiting me. As we start to just sit back and examine these things in our lives, and these things, opinions drive us. They drive our lives. They drive our actions. We make big decisions based on these. And most of them are not from our own experience. We're listening to other people. As I began to weave through and strip away opinions, I have probably have never felt so light, so free, greatest range of motion, mentally, emotionally, than I've ever felt. So here's an exercise, something that I might ask you to do. Think about an opinion that you contemplate, an opinion, a powerful opinion that has shaped you, something that you held fairly near and dear. And I want you just to think about, maybe it has to do with who your friends should be, or jobs. Maybe it has to do with careers, what career you should have. A successful person is this. A happy person is this. I should have a partner that looks like this. This is the path that I need, that's good people take. This is the path that bad people take. Even has to do with, this is what a real man looks like. This is what a real woman looks like. It could be as simple as clothing, even food choices. But I want you to think about one opinion one position that you hold that makes daily impact on you. And I want you to examine it and do it. You can start thinking about it now if you're anywhere near a pen and paper. Maybe start jotting some things down. If that works, you might be on your phone in the car. Do it later, please. But take one opinion. Well, and start to just think about it for a moment and just examine all the tentacles it may have in your life. I say when I'm talking about how does it influence where I go, who can be my friend, who I would be seen with, what kind of job I would have or would accept, how much money I would accept, what kind of car I drive, what kind of house I live in, what do I wear. Just one opinion, one particular opinion may have effects on all of these things. Again, like I say, it might even affect what you eat, daily choices, what programming you'll watch. You may have an opinion that brought you to this channel. And I'm not saying these opinions are good or bad. This is not about a judgment. This is about just looking at an opinion that you hold near and dear and really influences you on a daily basis. And then I want you to contemplate what it would be like if you temporarily set that opinion aside. Just, let's say, for a day or two, or maybe even a week. Can I possibly what would it look like if I didn't believe this? If that was not my opinion, how would my life be different right now? How would it impact my daily life? Who I could be with, who would be my friends, who would be my enemies if you were to have enemies, who would be my partner, what would be my next move? Would I be doing this job? If I didn't have this really set opinion, what would I really be doing? Where would my life be going if I didn't have that opinion? Start to see how that plays out for you. We don't often, very rarely in the beginning, do we see how our opinions can limit us. I haven't done anything I've ever wanted to in my entire life. And if anybody is familiar with the book Babbitt, if you read Babbitt, that he says, that's a line from Babbitt. He said to I'm not sure if it was I think it was to his wife, I have not done anything that I've ever wanted to in my entire life. And he was using that as a banner of honor. I've never got a chance to do what I want to do. Why should anybody else? Because he'd been living the opinions of others. He had been living the paradigm of others. He had climbed the ladder of success only to find that his ladder was on the wrong wall, to quote Joseph Campbell. I love that analogy. How have our opinions guided us? Have they taken us down a path that's not really us? Have they limited us? I would love to hang out with that group of people. I would love to go to that kind of performance. I'd love to go vacation this way, but I couldn't be seen doing that because a good whatever I am wouldn't do that, or that's just not fitting, or that's not appropriate. I'd like you to do that exercise, and I would really appreciate, and would really be powerful for me and us, if you either chatted in this evening or went to the email address and or the web page that's going to be showing up here. It's available right here on the channel, to give me your feedbacks. This is the kind of thing that we need to think about. You need to give it some time to really let it sit with you and contemplate it. I'm also going to guide you at this point to recommend that you go to the channel if you haven't already and start to look at some of those other videos that I have there. And they're going to help you set up this contemplation that I'm asking you to do. It's going to help you learn how to focus your attention, to even contemplate, to do this exercise. There's a number of videos on the channel that will be really helpful for you on this. So I'd like to asking yourself, how do I know? This is the big thing. How I know. You're starting to do something. You're starting to, with this exercise, you're starting to examine your life. You may be looking at things you've never looked at. You may be looking at things as I'm asking you to look at these opinions and what have you. You may be looking at them a little longer, a little harder, a little more seriously than you ever have. Maybe you've already done the work. Congratulations. But that examined life is the one worth living. And it brings us to this idea of how do I know? How do I know? How do I make a decision? If I'm not going to grab the opinion of someone else, how do I know what to do? Where do I go for right action? You've taken away my opinions now, Doug. Now what do I do? You've made me question every opinion that's come across my life, whether it's from a crazy opinion that I kind of extrapolated out of something that happened in my life, or even more removed, I'm now questioning all these other opinions I've been handed to me. So now what do I do? Where do I go? How do I know what to do now? And
what's the process?
The process it's a very simple process, Rob. Thank you. This is where I do my best to sell you something, I guess. But it's not a product, it's an idea. It's a process. And the process that I developed out of years of teaching meditation and these types of things, I call it the P.A.T.H. It's a 4-step process. P.A.T.H. is an acronym for 4 steps: pause, assess, take action, and heal. I'm not going to go into the whole process here. It is fully laid out and explained to you in videos on this channel. So when we get done tonight, maybe you can check out some of those videos, and they're not just the process, but how to apply this process in your daily life in relation to things like opinions. Other topics we cover, things about fear or anger, these types of things. But the process is simply one of learning to examine ourselves. Where do I start to look at myself? How do I do this? What's the first thing I have to do to objectively look at myself? How can I even start to look at these opinions and how they affect me? Hold my hand, walk me through it. That's what I do. That's what I do with this. The idea is to come into this place. How do I connect with an objective observer, that objective observer part of me? How can I look at myself objectively, clearly, not looking through the veils of opinion, not looking through the distortions of the filters I'm using or of my opinions, or through that glass darkly? The P.A.T.H. is a simple process that teaches you how to do just that. That is what it is designed to do, to help you objectively start to look at yourself. And opinions are a great place to take that ability to self-examine, to self-observe. That's what we're trying to do, is be better observers of ourselves. Once we do that, once we're able to be better observers of ourselves, better witnesses of ourselves and our emotions and our thoughts, then we get clarity. We become, I would say, more balanced, but that's a fairly general word. We're going to be happier. We're going to be more effective. And as I said, as I started to whittle away those opinions, and I'm saying I still have opinions, of course I do, but I've really let go of a number of them, and it's a practice for me now to, as they start to come up and I notice these opinions, I'm starting to react out of them. I know I can see it. I can see it ahead of time. I can see it 3 moves on the board. I can then head it off at the pass. And I'm less reactive out of those those things. As I've let those go, I feel so much more free. I think it's a real practice towards freedom. Let go of those things that don't serve us. Let go of those opinions. Let go of those preconceived ideas, those expectations. Those are all manifestations of opinions, aren't they? Expectations. I have an opinion that you need to do this by a certain time or a certain way. That's based on an opinion. Our judgments are based on opinions, false judgments, preconceived ideas. These are all manifestations of having these opinions. And we have a process to start to not only first recognize them and then judiciously let them go. This is a simplicity process. This is a practice of simplicity.
I have a question about that, Doug.
Sure.
Because I feel like sometimes I've been pretty good at letting go of a certain opinion or, identify it and it's not serving me or I picked it up here or there. And I let go of it in a way. Let go is kind of a strange term for me because it seems too easy, but sometimes it is that easy. But either way, so I let this thing go, but then a couple of years go by, or a couple of months go by, or a new relationship happens, or a new career happens, and I find those old opinions that I had that I worked so hard to get rid of are floating right back to the surface.
Absolutely.
And it's like maybe in a new context, and it seems like, oh well, I had this all figured out, and then I realized I didn't have it all figured out.
Those opinions, those judgments, those expectations, those are patterns of thought. And these patterns of thought actually set up neural wiring in our brain. We call them neural pathways. We have wired ourselves, or we've been wired to think in certain patterns and react accordingly. And it's very similar to learning to ride a bicycle. You set up in the body, the nervous system, you set up neural patterning to be able to ride and balance this bicycle. And that neural pattern is in there. And you can not ride a bicycle for 50 years and get back on one, and pretty soon you're able to ride again. So the body has neural patterning, but their mind does too. And the neural patterning it's objective. It's neutral. It's not good or bad. But we can have neural patterning for imbalanced thoughts. We think about that negative learning. Oh, don't show me how to do something incorrectly because I'll get that negative learning in place. Teach me how to do that dance move correctly. Teach me how to throw that baseball correctly so I don't develop bad habits. Well, the mind can have that same type of neural patterning, and opinions and these thoughts create those ruts, if you will. Those neural pathways become then like ruts in the road. And we think we've got it until we're stimulated the same way again. We're put into the similar circumstances where those opinions or those judgments or those expectations then find old home ground to pop back up. And what that just says to us is that we got to keep practicing. It's always a practice. It's an ongoing, that's the word, why practice? It's an ongoing effort to, there it is. But you recognize it when it comes up. You just told me, and I see that old thought, that old opinion coming back up. Well, the very fact that you observed it coming up, Before you didn't. You reacted right out of it. Now you see it coming, and you're standing back, you're sitting back, and objectively saying, "Oh, that old pattern is coming right back up to me." Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but I feel like sometimes you make it sound too easy. I mean, when one of these old cycles of suffering, I guess that's a term I've heard. When that comes back up, it's just like, man, it's like two steps forward, one step back, constantly with this type of stuff. And does it ever? I mean, I feel like, okay, I've gotten past these certain things. I've got that worked out, and it's done now. But then it comes back, and when it comes back, it just comes back with a vengeance. It comes back. The tricks that I used before to get me past that place don't work the same, or don't work as well, or aren't as potent. And the mindset is, I need to tweak them. I don't know. It's just a really
It's
difficult. I mean, the way you make it sound, they're just like, oh, just let go, and it's like this is.
well, just
It's
letting.
not that. It's not that easy, Doug.
It's not easy. It's not that easy. But the first place we start, and the first place we have to begin any of these practices is being able to stop and just step back and observe what's going on with us. That's the first thing tonight. I'm not asking you tonight to try to solve anything. Idea of can we let go? You're going to practice letting go of an opinion. Practice it. Try it. It may be difficult. Might even be impossible for you right now. But what you've done is you've made movement in the direction of being a little bit more of an objective observer. And like I said, we go back to some of the videos here on the PATH process, those 4 steps. I really encourage you to dig into those. We're going to talk about exactly step by step how to sit in the seat of that observer. Sometimes I call it being in your inner man cave. And if you're a woman, maybe your sacred space, just your sacred space where you can just sit and just be and observe the range of your thoughts, these opinions that come up. Oh, boy, that's coming up again. Yeah, it will. And every time it comes up, it's a little less potent. It's a little less inflamed. But the fact is that you're observing it now. You have built a different perspective. You have taken a different vantage point. This is the first step in correcting any of these these imbalances, these things that are throwing us off, whether it's imbalanced opinions or anything, these workings of the mind. It's the same thing with the body. We've got, you get an old injury, let's say an old football injury in the hip, and you think you got that hip fixed until a few years later, you put yourself into a similar situation. You use the hip and the leg in just the same way you did when you got injured playing football, and that old pain kicks right back in. That old neural pathway, that old rut in the road, if you will, kicks back in. It seems like it's kicking back even with more pain than it did before. This just shows you that, okay, that is still in place. I just need to work with it. All right, thank you. It reminded me that those pathways are still there. It's a practice. It's an ongoing practice. But every time it comes back up, we are better and better prepared to deal with it. These ruts and these cycles of suffering, I call them ruts in the road. Initially the car makes the rut in the road. It's a muddy road. The car goes down the road numbers of times and starts to form a rut. Initially the car dictated the rut, but over time the rut's so deep that the car has no choice but to follow that. Now the car's being controlled by that pattern in the road, the rut. That's what we're talking about here. So the first thing to do is get better at observing ourselves. That's step 1. Then we move on to taking corrective action. But the first step is just to be able to step back and just look at ourselves. And that's what I'm asking you to do tonight, is begin this process of just examining and maybe questioning those opinions we have, those expectations, those judgments we have. Where do they come from? Is it from my own experience? There's an interesting thing that I read something just recently that someone had done a study of great leaders in the 21st century, or the 20th century rather. People like FDR and Churchill and Gandhi, and the big names. And they all have been making decisions, history-ringing decisions. And how did they come to that final decision? What was their process? And they all collected their data. They had their people out collecting data and intelligence and what have you. They collected all the data. But when it came, and this what I'm going to say now actually isn't an opinion. It actually came from their memoirs and their interviews and what have you. When they came to that final decision of what to take, what move to make, whether it was D-Day invasion or getting independence for their country, they fell back on their gut feeling, their own intuitive feeling. And that's not just a whim. That's not just a fly-by-night feeling. But they were able to drop back instinctively and make a decision out of that observer platform, that observer space. They collected the data, and they heard a lot of opinions. Every one of these people had a lot of opinions coming at them from all their advisors. they were able to look and listen to those opinions with discernment and then make a balanced decision. And history speaks the rest. So this is a process that is not just for those of us on the path or in a spiritual practice or anything like this. This is a skill set that has been used by a lot of very successful folks in all sorts of genres. So I just would like to remind you, if you haven't had a chance to chat in, you've got a few more minutes to chat in tonight. I also like to invite you to go to my webpage where you'll get a lot of nice free stuff. You're going to get my meditation guide. You'll also get access to my weekly blog. And I also would like you to, again, go to some of the other videos on this channel where you're going to be able to get a sense of this process known as the path, which we're going to talk about more in future broadcasts, future talks. Thanks again.
So we have a comment here.
Okay.
Yeah, so Denise writes in, I found that when life is going really well, I forget to do those things that keep me well physically and mentally, but it doesn't take as long to get back to where I was and even further along.
That's great. Thanks, Denise. Thank you very much for that write-in. You know, that kind of just reminded me of what Rob had said. He said that, it seems like it's two steps forward and one step back. But when you say that, you realize that the result of that is at least one step forward. And I think that's what you're getting to as well, is that, yes, I might rebound a little bit, I move forward and I take a little bit of a fallback, but I'm always moving forward. And that's the key. We're always, as long as we're moving forward, we're moving in the direction we say we want to go. Thanks, Denise. Does that put some light on what you had said, Rob?
I think that was a really interesting point, a really key point that I hadn't really thought of it that way, that you are making that one step forward. And sometimes it doesn't even feel like a step. Maybe it's just a direction. But it is making progress. It's hard to see it, though, in the moment.
And how do we measure progress? How do we, that's a discussion there. How are we making progress in this kind of field? And I think we start to see that one of the ways that we notice our progress is just our ability to be a little less reactive and a little bit hold on loosely to our, not just our opinions, but just not take ourselves quite as seriously as we used to. Can we just sit back and maybe even laugh at ourselves gently? Being able to see the humor in ourselves, not class clown kind of humor, but just being able to see the humor in ourselves is evidence that we're making some movement. We're holding on loosely to all those rigid views of ourselves, of what we should be doing. We tend to hold on to life. We hold on to life dearly, but we hold on to our opinions lightly so that we can move through life with a little more lightness, a little more ease. Okay, so I would like to, again, thank you all for being here this evening. This has been another great chat. I appreciate all the folks that chatted in and those of you watching. And I invite you to come back next week, same time, same channel. We're going to have a new topic throughout this next week. I really appreciate any feedback from you all as far as ideas, things you want to talk about, questions you may have, topics that would be of interest to you. What's going on with your life? Practices I've asked you to engage in from this evening, and the exercises I've asked you to do. How's it working for you? What's working? What doesn't seem to be working? Where are you running into some obstacles or some sticky points? I'd be happy to engage you throughout the week via email and via the YouTube channel. So also be looking on a weekly basis, just about almost every day, we put out a short video, something to get you thinking and motivated through the week. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.